Okay, so when you hear the word witchcraft, I bet for most people your mind jumps to a pretty specific image.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Pointed hats, maybe a cauldron.
Exactly. Or, the really dark history, the European witch trials, that specific European picture has dominated for so long.
It really has. But that picture, well, it's just profoundly misleading, isn't it? What we're actually exploring today isn't one single thing. It's more like a global tapestry.
Tapestry, I like that.
Yeah. Witchcraft, magic, folk, religion, whatever term you use, it's incredibly diverse. It changes hugely across continents, across centuries. And crucially, these practices are often really deeply woven to cultural identity, survival even, and this profound desire to, maintain balance with the world around us, nature, spirits.
Right. So that's our mission today then. We want to follow your sources around the globe, find those aha moments, and really understand the common threads under all the differences. Kind of move beyond just the European framework to see how everyone connects with the unseen. So let's unpack this. Where should we start? Europe seems like the obvious place, given the imagery.
It's the logical place to begin, yeah.
Yeah.
Historically, what people often labeled European witchcraft,
Yeah.
well, for centuries, it was really just folk magic.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about things like the cunning folk
What?
and hedge witches, those kinds of figures.
Exactly. The village wise woman or wise man in rural Europe.
Yeah, and they weren't like secretive devil worshippers in hiding. They were actually pretty essential community figures, weren't they? Respected.
Very much so. They were the healers, the midwives, protectors, using herbs, simple charms, practical spells, fixing everyday problems, curses, illness, finding lost things for their neighbors. It was very utilitarian.
The practical magic.
Precisely. And that older, sort of localized tradition, it's really distinct from the modern movement we know as Wicca.
Ah, okay. Wicca came much later, didn't it?
Much later. Mid-20th century, developed by Gerald Gardner over in England. Wicca is a formalized, modern, pagan religion. It has key characteristics like honoring a goddess and a god.
And the wheel of the year, the Sabbats.
Exactly. Celebrating the Sabbats, incorporating ritual magic, often within a structured group, a coven. It's quite different.
It's fascinating how those two things sort of coexist now. You've got modern Wicca, but then you also have people reclaiming what they call traditional witchcraft paths.
Right. Trying to connect back to those older folk practices.
Yeah, focusing more on like land spirits, local folklore, ancestors, maybe less formalized ritual.
Often, yes. It's a conscious contrast to the Gardnerian model, while also acknowledging the shadow of the European witch trials, that period in the 15th to 17th centuries, which really created that fearful image we started with.
Okay, so that sets the European scene. Where do we go next to broaden the picture?
Well, if Europe often framed its folk magic around, say, the individual wise person serving the community, let's shift to Africa. Because there, spiritual practice feels fundamentally rooted in the collective, in communal balance. It shifts the focus.
That feels like a really powerful distinction, not just individual help, but group harmony.
And in many parts of Africa, these traditions aren't some niche interest. They're just interwoven with daily life, with the identity.
I find the West African traditions so compelling, especially thinking about their influence later in the Americas.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about the incredibly rich spiritual history of, say, the Yoruba people, and through the tragedy of the transatlantic slave trade, their religion established powerful diaspora branches. Think Santeria in Cuba, Candomblé in Brazil.
Right, and the core focus there is honoring the Orishas, correct? These divine beings.
Yes, the Orishas. They're manifestations of the Supreme Creator, often associated with forces of nature or aspects of humanity, the ocean, justice, war, love.
And interacting with them isn't just quiet prayer, it's quite involved, right? Drumming, dance.
Oh, yes. Complex, formalized rituals. Drumming, dance, intricate offerings, divination systems like Ifa, all to understand the Orisha's will and maintain that crucial harmony.
Now, you mentioned before we started recording something about a clear distinction in South Africa between types of practitioners.
Yes, that's fascinating too. If we look at, for example, South African traditions among groups like the Zulu, the community makes a really vital distinction. On one side, you have respected healers.
Okay.
The Sangomas, who are diviners, or the Inyangas, the herbalists. These people are revered. They have profound herbal knowledge, offer spiritual guidance, and they work for the good of the community.
So they're the positive, accepted forces, bringing balance.
Precisely. But then on the other side, there are feared individuals, often just labeled sorcerers. They're believed to use spiritual power, sometimes called upathati, for malicious reasons, causing illness, misfortune, stirring up trouble. They often get blamed when things go wrong, inexplicably in the community.
So is the difference mainly the intent? Is the actual, like, spiritual power itself neutral, maybe?
That's the core question, isn't it? The power itself might be neutral, but how it's used, the ethics behind it, that defines your role. And underpinning almost all of this, right across sub-Saharan Africa, is ancestor veneration.
Right, honoring the ancestors.
It's central, keeping that harmony between the living and the spirit world through rituals, regular offerings. The ancestors are seen as active participants in daily life.
Okay, so we have Europe, Africa, now the Americas. This is where it gets really interesting, I think, because you see this intense blending.
Absolutely. African traditions colliding with indigenous beliefs, European influences, often under really harsh conditions. It leads to powerful syncretism, the mixing of belief systems. It's magic born from survival, from resilience.
And the prime example people often point to is hoodoo or root work.
That's the one. Originating among enslaved African communities, particularly in the American South. And it's important to clarify, hoodoo isn't generally seen as a formalized religion like Santeria. It's more a system of folk magic, of empowerment, a really potent expression of resistance.
And very practical again, using herbs, roots, making charms.
Candles, oils, powders, all for immediate, tangible needs. Protection, finding justice, healing, drawing love or money. Whatever was needed to survive and exert some control.
And you mentioned something earlier about surprising elements being incorporated, like Christian elements.
Yes, and this really speaks to that adaptation and resilience. One of the striking things about hoodoo is the traditional use of the Psalms.
Wait, the actual Psalms? From the Bible? How did that fit in?
Well, think about the context. Enslaved people were often forbidden from openly practicing their African religions.
Right.
But they were often forced to attend Christian services. So by incorporating Psalm-specific verses believed to hold power for certain conditions into their spells and root work, they could mask the African magical framework. The prayers, the intentions, the herbal knowledge could be hidden within this sort of tolerated Christian overlay. It made the practice survivable, adaptable.
Wow. That's incredible ingenuity born of necessity. And you see similar blending in brujería throughout Latin America, right?
Exactly. Brujería shows incredible regional variety because of centuries of colonization and mixing. You frequently see Catholic saints being venerated.
But they might stand in for orishas or indigenous deities.
Precisely. It's this seamless blend of Catholic practices with indigenous traditions and African spiritualities, creating unique, powerful, local forms of magic and healing.
And speaking of healing, that brings us to curanderismo.
A highly respected, often family-based healing tradition. You find it mainly in Mexico and the southwestern U.S.
And a curandero or curandera, they're like holistic healers?
Exactly. They use herbal remedies, prayer, and importantly, spiritual cleansing rituals, limpias, to treat not just physical problems, but also spiritual illnesses, imbalances, things like susto or fright sickness.
That focus on the limpia, the cleansing, it really echoes that need for restoring balance and protection that seems so central in these American traditions, forged in tough environments.
It does. Now, should we shift our focus eastward?
Let's do it. Asia. Here, it feels like the magical traditions are often integrated into much larger philosophical or religious systems, doesn't it? The term witchcraft might not even fit well.
It often doesn't feel adequate, no. The goal seems to shift sometimes from, say, immediate protection, like in hoodoo, towards achieving a kind of cosmic alignment.
Oh, wait, like in Chinese practices.
Right. Take Chinese folk magic and Taoist practices. The whole structure is often based on understanding and balancing qi.
Qi, yeah. Often translated as life force.
Sort of, yeah. It's the vital flowing energy of the universe, the balance between yin and yang. Taoist priests, folk magicians, they work to harmonize this qi. They might use complex talismans, feng shui, which is geomancy, intricate divination rituals, all to interact with spirits and ensure cosmic health, systemic balance.
And then in Japan, you had onmudu.
Yes, an ancient, quite institutionalized practice. It blended Shinto, Buddhism, and Chinese cosmology. And the practitioners, the onmiji, they weren't just village folk magicians.
No, they were like state officials almost.
Pretty much. They used astrology, calendar making, specific rituals, all aimed at protecting the state, keeping harmony in the imperial court. It was applied cosmology for governance.
Fascinating. And further north, Siberia, Mongolia, Shamans.
Deep-seated traditions there. Shamans act as crucial intermediaries between the human world and the spirit realms. They're famous for entering these powerful trance states.
Often using drumming, right?
Yeah, rhythmic drumming, chanting, specifically to travel to the spirit world, to retrieve lost souls, heal individuals, or restore balance to the community if it's been disrupted by spirits.
Okay, one more region, Oceania. What's the focus there?
Again, it feels less like spell casting and more about a deeply ingrained spiritual worldview tied directly to the land and to lineage.
Like Hawaiian traditions. Huna.
Exactly. Hawaiian Huna and the role of the kahuna. Kahunas were the experts, priests, healers, master craftspeople, navigators. Their practices involved intense prayer, specific chants, energy work, often focused on healing and achieving pono, or balance and righteousness. It's about personal power and responsibility within the community and cosmos.
And Maori traditions in New Zealand. I know mana is a key concept.
Hugely important. Maori traditions center on two really powerful core concepts, mana and tapu.
Okay.
So mana is spiritual power, prestige, authority. It's a force that can reside in people, objects, places. It flows through lineage and accomplishment.
And tapu.
Tapu refers to sacredness, restrictions, prohibitions, things that are set apart, either because they are inherently sacred or potentially dangerous. Observing tapu is essential to protect mana and maintain order and balance. Violating tapu risks spiritual harm and disruption. It emphasizes profound respect for ancestors, the land, the gods.
Wow. Okay, so we've done a whirlwind tour around the globe. Now that we've journeyed from Europe to Africa, the Americas, Asia, Oceania, what really stands out to you? Because the names change, balancing ki, honoring an orisha, protecting mana, but there seem to be some really strong shared threads.
Or absolutely, if you try to connect the dots, despite all the incredible diversity, every single regional tradition we've touched on seems to share some fundamental priorities.
Like what?
Well, first, a profound connection to nature and the immediate environment. It's inescapable. Second, the use of practices for healing and protection. Third, a deep, often formalized respect for ancestors and spirits. And fourth, the use of ritual in countless forms as a necessary bridge, a way to connect with and influence the unseen world.
Those seem universal, but you also hinted that the underlying goal might shift sometimes.
I think it does, particularly if you look at many traditions from the Global South or indigenous practices we discussed like Taoism, Yoruba religion, Maori traditions. The emphasis feels heavily systemic. It's about maintaining communal balance, cosmic harmony. The well-being of the group or the cosmos is paramount.
Okay. And how does that compare to modern Western approaches?
Well, it can stand in pretty sharp contrast to the focus you sometimes see in modern Western-derived paths, where the core goal might be framed more around self-improvement, personal empowerment, or individual manifestation. Not always, but often.
Right. So what does all this mean for someone today who's interested in these paths? What's the final nugget of knowledge here?
I think the most vital thing is respect. Look,
Sure.
modern practitioners absolutely draw inspiration from this amazing global tapestry. That's natural. But it's crucial to remember that many of these practices, think curanderismo, santeria, hoodoo, aren't just historical artifacts. They're living, breathing, often sacred systems deeply tied to specific cultures, specific histories, often histories of resistance and resilience.
So it's about honoring the roots, not just taking bits and pieces.
Exactly. Honoring the roots,
Thank you.
understanding the context, maybe seeking out teachers from within those traditions if appropriate, rather than simply appropriating sacred practices for purely individualistic consumption without that deep understanding or connection.
The history of magic isn't just one story then. It's this incredible reflection of humanity's enduring desire everywhere to find our place, to align ourselves with the mysterious forces of the universe.
And exploring these traditions helps us understand not just what people believed, but maybe why they needed to believe it, what function it served in their lives and communities.
Okay, so here's a final thought, something for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. Think about how practices that are deeply rooted in communal resilience, in sheer survival, like hoodoo, like curanderismo we talked about, how does their fundamental goal contrast with maybe more individualistic focuses we sometimes see in modern interpretations?
Yeah, how does the purpose of spiritual practice shift when your very ability to endure, to protect your family, to keep your culture alive is what's at stake?
When survival drives the magic.
It becomes less of a personal development tool and more of a profound communal responsibility, perhaps.
Something to think about. We really encourage you to explore which of these diverse cultural traditions might resonate most strongly with your own sense of balance, healing, and connection. Until the next deep dive, keep learning.